One of the key principles that I've been learning in leadership and in my parenting especially, and really all throughout my life lately, and if you've been around me, you've heard me talk about this, is that mostly anything significant that takes place in our lives is going to involve some level of pain or discomfort. Anything significant. Now, we cannot ever do hard things, and we can be lazy and maybe no pain, but probably nothing significant. But I'm discovering, I don't want to say always, but I feel like I'm close to saying always, the significant things that we see happen in our lives almost always involve some level of pain or at least a little bit of discomfort. But here's the deal, okay? You've got to get pain if you're going to do anything significant. You've got to get some discomfort, but you do have a little bit of say-so in the matter, and here it is. We get to choose whether the pain comes on the front end or the back end. Front end pain looks like this: taking a risk, trying something new, leaving the familiar. Back end pain looks a little more like this: regret, missed opportunities, and especially wishing that we had chosen front end pain. Anybody know this? Anybody can think about their semesters in college? Those of you that weren't perfect? Those of you that didn't keep up with the syllabus? Anybody? You're like, no, I'm just going to play video games. I'm going to hang out with this girl that I'm going to for sure marry. We're going to watch the sunrise. I'm going to not worry about my classwork. I'm just going to do whatever I want to do. And then you get to the final exam, and what are you wishing? Right? The girl, you don't even know where she is anymore. And now you've got back end pain. Anybody had back end pain because you were so busy with your life you didn't have time to stop and get gas at the gas station? Anybody ever had that kind of back end pain? Like, yeah, maybe I wasn't that busy to stop at the Shell because now I'm on the side of the interstate. I think in a serious way, I see this the most probably when it comes to relationships. I encounter so many people who are afraid of the pain of being single their entire lives, so they lower their standards, they decrease and walk away from their values. Some of them even walk away from their faith, and they end up in a toxic marriage years down the road with tons of back-end pain that, though I'm not saying the single thing wasn't difficult or uncomfortable or even painful at times, but now you're in a much more painful situation. I see that all the time. And what I want to say today is that mostly in everything in life, you and I need to choose front-end pain. Choose front-end pain. Do the hard thing on the front end. Enjoy the reaping of beautiful things on the back end. Or if you don't do what's difficult on the front end, usually what you will reap is negative on the back end. And this is the big idea for us today. What I want to do today is talk about the idea of community based on whether or not you're choosing front-end pain or back-end pain when it comes to community. And what I'm asking God to do this morning, and what I'm going to try to do with all of my heart this morning, is to persuade every one of you in this room, if you live here in San Francisco, to choose front-end pain when it comes to community. Because the back-end pain is just too destructive. Front-end pain when it comes to community looks like this: showing up and not sure if everyone in the small group you joined today is going to be weird or strange. We do have weirdos at our church. They don't get to serve in Epic Kids. And no small group only has weirdos, okay? All right, so you're not going to be the only normal person there, okay? And anyway, we'll talk more about that in a second. Can't share all the secrets on the front end. Front-end pain looks like trying to find parking in the marina for the Monday night 7 o'clock group. That's front-end pain. And some of you are like, Ben, no, I'm riding my bike to that group. Front-end pain looks like a little bit of vulnerability, if not a lot of vulnerability initially. Front-end pain can be uncomfortable when it comes to community, when it comes to even being a part of the Epic groups that we place a major premium on this morning. And what I'm saying today is I want to persuade you to go with the front-end pain. Here's so much. I'm going to give you a privilege to do something that I never, ever give you the privilege to do in here on Sunday mornings. I want you to get your communication card out, all right? And I'm so badly want to persuade you this morning to join a group that if after 5 minutes of my persuasion you're ready, you can check out of the rest of the message because you're checking into something much better. Like, seriously. And some of you are like, Ben, this is great permission because I'm doing the fantasy football thing. And at least some of you are like, Ben, I do this every week. I'm just glad I don't have to feel guilty for it this week. But seriously, if 5 minutes in, 15 minutes in, all the way to the end, you're persuaded, you have my permission to check out. But I think it's one of my best messages ever. Seriously. Just kidding. Brad was praying for humility, so I definitely if I felt that way, I would never say it publicly. But seriously, as you're persuaded, join a group. And not just make a commitment to join a group, be so compelled to not only join a group, but actually to fully engage in that group over the next 12 or 13 weeks. If it doesn't do for you what we're telling you it's going to do for you, then we'll give you an out after that. Front end pain are some of those things, but back end pain for not attaching yourself early on to community, back end pain looks like this: a life in isolation. A life in the second most densely populated city, crowded like crazy, thinking you're around people, so what's the big deal? And feeling more utterly alone than you've ever felt in your entire life. Back end pain is having no one in this room know you beyond the surface of what you like, where you work, where you're from. And what I want to do is persuade you to choose front end pain. And here's what you need to know about the pain associated with your approach to community. You won't have community when you most need it unless you get rooted in community before that time comes. You won't be able to reap the benefits that community affords you unless you sow into or unless you get attached to community long before that time comes. And you're like, all right, Ben, I'm going to see it coming and I'm just going to get into community maybe 3 weeks before that. Here's the problem. You never see it coming. You never know when it's going to hit you. You never know when you're going to have something that you need to share and you don't know anyone beyond the surface. You don't know when something's going to be so devastating in your life and you have no one, at least in this city, to call. And I want to say that in a city like San Francisco, we don't need this less because we have so many other things we can do with our time. We need this more. Most of us aren't close to family members, right? Most of us. Some of your family live far away in the U.S. Some of your families live around the world far from you. You need this more, not less. You have all kinds of opportunities to be tempted to what to do with your time and your energy and all of that, your nights, your weekends. And what I want to say to you is this is the best thing that you can do for yourself. So I gave you permission to check out of the message. So I'm assuming everyone that's sleeping has already signed up for a group. Here's some more permission that I want to give you. I'm not even asking you to be unselfish when it comes to joining a group. Okay? I think the most selfish thing you can do is join a group. Now, we'll talk about you when you're not around. But I think even if you're a selfish person in the room, even if you want the best thing for your own life and you don't care about anybody else, plug yourself in, attach yourself to community, even if you're selfish. Okay? Everybody with me? Here's what I want to do. I want to show you your future by looking at a text that's nearly 3,000 years old. So if you have a Bible, Ecclesiastes chapter 4. If you need one, just lift a hand. We'll get one to you, and you can follow along with us this morning. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, Solomon, known as the wisest man who ever lived, and some of you who are arrogant are thinking that's only because I wasn't alive back then. Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, is going to shed light on what my future and your future looks like based on what we do or don't do when it comes to community. So stand with me. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 7 through 12. And I just wonder if, like me, you'll see so many people in our city in this text, people maybe even in our church in this text, and perhaps even yourself in this text. It describes a lot of people that I interact with on a weekly basis. Here's what Solomon says. Again, I saw vanity under the sun. One person who has no other, either son or brother, yet there is no end to all his toil. And his eyes are never satisfied with riches, so that he never asks, for whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? This also is vanity and an unhappy business. Two are better than one because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if two lie together, they keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? All right, I got to pause. I got to make two comments about verse 11 before you interpret it in the wrong way, okay? All right. Okay. For starters, did anyone have trouble finding warmth alone Tuesday night when it was 1,000,000 degrees in San Francisco? Some of you kicked your spouse out of the bed, all right? So you're thinking, Ben, the Bible's not true. I can prove it, Ecclesiastes 4:11. I couldn't open a certain amount of windows. I couldn't run enough fans. Anybody else? Anybody miserable? Thankfully, there were articles in the Chronicle this week published about, I wasn't the only one, 12 ways you need to understand sleeping in the heat. One was that you don't sleep as good, so it gave me a great excuse for work the next day. It takes you longer to fall asleep. So that's one thing I want to say about that. Listen, I realize that at times, some of us just need to take this metaphorically, okay? Speaking of metaphorically, for those of you who now want to join a small group because you think we're going to give you a getting warm with buddy, it's a different church, okay? If you want to marry them, all for it. Otherwise, we're going to use it metaphorically, all right? Verse 12. And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. Your future is in this text, whether you choose front in pain or back in pain, and you will choose one or the other, and you will reap from one or the other. You may be seated. My hope is that God will use Solomon's wisdom, and what I'm going to try to show us is from cover to cover in the scriptures. It's not just this one text, though I think this text describes it better than all others. There's so many examples of how this is true. You see Jesus, God, and the Spirit, God the Father and God the Spirit are creating in community together. You see communities all throughout the Old Testament. You get to Acts chapter 2, and you see them meeting together day by day and sharing their lives and their stuff with one another. And so this is a principle all throughout the scriptures. But in this text, Solomon gives us something that's so helpful. First thing he says is, here's what's being done in vain. There's a guy, and this guy is working his tail off, and this guy is getting incredibly wealthy. Anybody sound familiar here? Not in San Francisco, no. But he has no one to share it with. So he's working hard, he's getting tons of wealth, but he has no one to share it with. And the interesting thing is that it looks like he has everything we think we would need for satisfaction, only what? He isn't, what? I guess everyone has joined a group because every person in the room has checked out of the message. It says that he's never satisfied, verse 8. He's never satisfied with riches. The thing that he thought would do for him, what it promised to do for him, didn't do it for him in the end. He has no one to share it with. For most of us, if I were to ask you, hey, which would you rather choose? You can, A, have financial wealth, but be poor when it comes to community, or you can have your financial needs met and be wealthy when it comes to community. Which would you choose? Now, I know your answer because you're at church, right? I know what you would say in the small group. I would too, because I'm the pastor. The pastor can't be saying, I'm here to get rich. And I'm not, by the way. Would have chosen a different industry. No stock in Epic Church, although whatever. But many of us are clamoring for financial wealth at all costs, even to the detriment of a lack of being in community. Because we've bought the lie about what's most important in the world. And there's an equation that I have just kind of come up with. Of course, I think Solomon came up with it. I think Jesus speaks to it in the scriptures. But here's the equation based off this text and my interaction with tons of people. Everything in the world plus no one to share it with equals dissatisfaction. Everything, like everything in the world plus no one to share it with equals dissatisfaction. And some of you in the room are like, Ben, I would love to take that test just for a day. Anybody else? You're right, Ben, I'm in such a situation right now, I would give up like my best 8 friends just to try the left side of the equation. Just for a day, just to see if it's true. This guy has tried it. He's gotten all the things he could have ever desired, and he's saying this guy has nothing. He's dissatisfied. You remember Jesus said one time, what good is it to gain the whole world yet forfeit your soul? I think what Solomon's saying in the same vein is, what good is it to gain the whole world and yet forfeit true community? Forfeit a deeply shared life. What good is it if you have everything and no one to share it with? It says in the text about this man that he never stopped at one time to consider, for whom am I doing this? What's the point? Why am I killing myself? Why am I going for it? Why am I trying to get wealthy and I have no one to share it with? No one to share it with. Marcus Persson, the founder of Minecraft, sold Minecraft for $2.5 billion. $2.5 billion. Wow, right? Because some of you, if you're like me, you're like, Ben, I don't care if it's billion with the B or million with an M or trillion with the TR, right? I just want something that ends in illion. Anybody? Certainly, he must have everything that he wants. Well, yes and no. He has everything that money can buy, but he seems to be missing some of the things that money could never buy for any of us. He'd recently tweeted this, which I thought was fascinating. He says he was partying with famous people, able to do whatever I want, and I've never felt more isolated. Partying with famous people, able to do whatever I want, and I've never felt more isolated. See, it wasn't even that he wasn't around people. He was around people. He was around the really cool people. And it didn't do it for him. And some of you, though you're living, as I said earlier, in the second most densely populated city in America, you're with people everywhere, right? You've got 12 roommates just to pay the rent, and you're in a 2-bedroom. I know. And yet you could still be living in isolation and at the core, utterly alone. Because the question isn't, are you surrounded by people at the office? Are you surrounded by people in the city? I know that answer. The question is, are you connected? Are you attached to any kind of deep level that's beyond the surface of knowing just general things about each other? Are you connected? I have a friend, and it's very interesting seeing this lived out in her life right now. She, in the season of her life, is making more money than she's ever made by far. Ends in illions, you know. But talking to her recently, because she's at that level of making that kind of wealth, part of the agreement was that she had to give certain things up because of the demands at that level of income. She literally had to give up community. And talking to her recently, she said, I miss my community. Thankfully, she has only a little bit of time left with her current commitment, and she'll have a chance after that's over to decide again, am I going to choose the front-end pain of community or the back-end pain? And what I'm telling her now is this: remember later what you're telling me now. She's got months left, and then she's going to be out of that commitment. She's making more money than she's ever made, but she says, I feel so disconnected and so dissatisfied. But she's going to have a chance in a few months to decide if she meant what she's telling me now. Everything in the world, but nothing in community equals dissatisfaction. So again, I just want to ask you, what are you pining for? What are you running after? What are you pursuing? What are you seeking? And what if in the end it can't do for you or I what it promises to do for you or not? See, community can do for you what money can't do for you. Community can do for you what achievement will never do for you. And here's the big kicker. Community can do for you what you can never do for you. I know you're amazing, but you're limited. Do you know that if you're going to follow Jesus, that probably like half of the commands can't even be carried out if you're not a part of a community? All the one another's in the scriptures. How are you going to bear one another's burdens when you don't have another? It's like this person here. This person in the text, listen, he's going to fall because everyone's going to fall, but he's not going to have anyone to help him up. He's going to have no one to keep him metaphorically warm, right, class? All you young singles, yes? Metaphor, right? I know what you're going to do. You're going to just get this clip out of the message. No, stop. And when this guy encounters something or someone who could quickly break him, he's going to be broken because why? He doesn't get to enjoy that 3-strand. He doesn't get to enjoy the 3-fold cords because he's going to be quickly broken because he hasn't attached himself to community. Community can do for you what these other things can never do for you. And let me give you a shocker this morning, something that might make you even angry at me. Community can do for you what Epic Church as an organization cannot do for you. So most weeks we have nearly 500 people who attend our church, 700 or more over the course of a month, and we can't program or care for everyone specifically. We just can't do it. That's why we put such a high premium on this whole idea of Epic Groups. It's the whole point of Epic Groups, that you get cared for, that you become known. We can't do that anymore. We even have a mantra here, just to be honest. Again, it might anger you, but our mantra is always choose the good of the many over the good of the one or the good of the few. When it comes to programming, okay? Not when it comes to who you're going to marry, okay? Just choose the one. Everybody with Pastor? Just choose the one. But in terms of how we program and how we set up systems and how we care for you and what we do on Sundays and the offerings that we give, we're always thinking what's good for the general population of Epic Church. But in an Epic group, you can be cared for specifically. Your personal needs can be met. On Sunday, I can ask you about the weather and maybe the job if I know about it, but someone in the group can say to you, hey, I know your dad upset you last week. Is that reconciled? Someone in the group can say, hey, I know you haven't found transportation yet. Can I help? That just can't happen on a mass scale for the 4 full-time staff members that we have here. But your group leader and your group participants, they can know you in that way. They can do for you what we as an organization will never be able to do for you. We want you to thrive in life and faith in every area of your lives. But we can't do for you what the people who can know you best can do for you. Again, we want to respond to things, of course, like, man, hospital stuff, emergencies, financial help. We do that. But we can't carve it out specifically for every person that comes here over the month. But some can, and that's why we've created these groups, and that's why I tell you, choose front-end pain. Even if you feel like you're socially awkward, choose front-end pain. Even if you think you're cool and afraid of someone who is socially awkward, choose front-end pain, okay? Everybody with me? Point made? All right, I'm not done. I'm not done. Just for fun, I want to give you 4 myths about people who are deeply connected at Epic Church, okay? Just have some fun with me here. 4 myths about people who are deeply connected at Epic Church. The first one is this: they just happen to get lucky. They just happen to get lucky. God loves them more than he loves us, and they just got lucky. Myth number 2, maybe my favorite. The staff chose them over me. Nobody's laughing. These are myths, people. The staff chose them over me. The staff was playing this big church-wide kickball game. We were the captains, and you didn't get chosen. Number 3, they must all be extroverts. They must all be extroverts. Yep, they're just their personality. That's why they're so deeply connected. Number 4, before I forget, they have been here since the beginning of the church. They're myths. They're just myths. Here's the reality. They chose front-end pain. They put themselves out there. They likely got attached to a group. And here's what's crazy. There are people in this room who've been going to Epic for over 3 years. This is all true. Been going to Epic over 3 years, and you're not as deeply connected as someone who's just started going here 6 months ago. And it's not because we chose them. It's not because they're extroverts. It's not because they obviously haven't been here since the beginning of the church. It's not because they just got lucky. They put themselves out there, and now they are reaping the benefits of being in community, and you can reap the same 6 months from now. But you've got to attach yourself at some level. We want to provide programming, but at the end of the day, we can't say, or we can't make you do the things that we're trying to advocate and persuade you to do today. This is for your good. This is for your good. It's the way God designed you. It's for your good. And let me let you know a few secrets from that we tell our group leaders, okay? This is where the group leaders feel like they're being busted right now. Let me tell you 3 things we tell our group leaders, okay? Number 1, anyone in the group, anyone who attends the group doesn't have to ever pray out loud if they're uncomfortable with that or know anything yet about the Bible, okay? You're safe there. We're going to teach you some things, but you're safe. Number 2, our groups are discussion-oriented group and not lecture-oriented groups, okay? Here's what I want you to do, okay? Here's more permission. If your group leader begins to lecture your group most of the time, I want you to send me an email and say, Ben, somebody's trying to take your job because I know you're the only lecturer at Epic Church. Okay? Just send me that email. We'll fire them. Number 3, they've been told not to let any single person dominate their group. Have you ever been in a church group or a work group or a friends group where one person has 80 to 90% of all the words used in the group? Yeah? Anybody? Some of you are like, No, Ben, I need to tell you something. Yep, it's you. Self-awareness really is king these days. It's you. But those are some things we just want you to just know, like, you're safe, okay? There's a little bit of front-end pain, but we're removing other kinds of pain that you might be afraid of. 2 weeks ago today, there was a lady after the 11 o'clock service who came up to me with an urgent look on her face. And she said, are you the pastor? Because I need to speak to the pastor. And that's never usually good, okay? I started thinking like, oh man, what did I put out on social media this week? What kind of heresy did I teach with this morning? No, I just grabbed a random person. No, he's the pastor. I just had the message today, but this is the pastor. And the reason she wanted to see the pastor is because she was standing there with her 17-year-old son, and she was bringing him and dropping him off in San Francisco for college. But she wasn't bringing him from Southern California and kind of worried about him getting attached to a church. She wasn't even bringing him from the East Coast of the United States and helping him get attached to a city, the college, and the church. They had came from their motherland of Nigeria to go to college here and to drop him off. And what amazed me is because of her heart for her 17-year-old son, she chose front-end pain. She paid double the airfare from Nigeria to San Francisco. Okay? She chose the front-end pain on a Sunday morning of navigating a city that she was completely unfamiliar with because she cared so much that her 17-year-old son get attached on the front end, even if it's painful, even if it's expensive, even if it's awkward, because she knew what could happen on the back end if he didn't. And as Shauna and I are talking, there's a couple out of the corner of my eye. I know that they're Nigerian, so I bring them over like, God, that's a perfect kind of thing you would do. Man, I introduced this couple to the mom and her son. They start talking about where they're from, and then the couple walks off. Okay, that's not a great God moment, but whatever. Shauna and I continue to talk to the mom, and I'm giving her my email address, and then lo and behold, the couple come back, and now they have 3 other Nigerians with them. So now it's Shauna and I and 7 Nigerians talking about places and things we know nothing about. They realize that some of them were from the same state. And as they began to exchange contact information and thinking about even this message, like, this is what front-end pain looks like. And most of us in here don't have 17-year-old kids, but if you would just do this for yourself, that, again, be selfish. Because community isn't just for 17-year-olds who come to San Francisco from Nigeria so that their mom can get on a plane on Tuesday and go back home and feel good about where she left her son. It's for the 45-year-old millionaire that's sitting in this room right now and you're trying to evaluate what your values are going to be moving forward. And it's for the 25-year-old single female in this room right now. You've got a lot of freedom. You're making more money than you've ever made, and you have to make some critical decisions about what you're going to give your life, your days, and your weeks to. And it's for the couple in their 60s who are here. They're empty nesters, and the man or the woman's got an executive level position, and you can have a ton of fun. You can enjoy a city that you've never lived in before, and you can just hang out with yourself. But I want to tell you, we need you and you need us. It's for the mom who only has toddlers at home, and she's longing for adult conversations. You know this because when she sees you later and you tell her you're going to the bathroom, she's like, hey, did you potty okay? You know, when you come back out, that's when like, hey, she needs help. And here's the thing. It's even for the pastor who feels because of his position, he's a bit tempted to not be so close or so vulnerable. We have no excuses. But we're all choosing the pain on the front end of the back end. Solomon believed this. I believe this with all of my heart, even though it's not the easiest thing for me. But Jesus embodied this too. Do you know that from the very beginning, Jesus was always in community? The scriptures say that in the very beginning, the Father, the Son, and the Spirit were there, living in community, having distinct roles, but living in the beautiful community of each other. Then Jesus comes to earth, and he calls 12 men to follow him, yes, for the sake of mission, but I can show you also for the sake of community, he chooses them. And out of those 12 he's generally close to, he chooses 3 that he's going to be specifically and especially close to, and he pours his life out to them. He allows them to see things about his own life and his own calling that no one else gets to see. And one day he gets to this dark point, the darkest place in his life so far. He's in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he says to his friends, guys, I need you to stay awake and pray with me and for me. You see, it's arrogant to think that you need something that Jesus claimed to need, that you don't need something that Jesus claimed to need. It's arrogant to think that the Son of God, you know, so often when I stand up here and give examples like, hey, we've all sinned, and then you have to throw in like the accept Jesus, right? Because then you get the emails. Like, Ben, you said we're all sinners. What about the guy who lived? I know. But here's the thing. When it comes to community, and when I say every one of us are created for community, every one of us choose front-end pain or back-end pain, include Jesus in this. He's in the garden. He's the Son of God. And he's asking guys that aren't all that awesome, speaking of the small group member who's not a whole lot of help. Anybody? He's asking Peter and James and John, can you guys just stay away? Now, they don't get it right. They're not great community for him, but it's all the community he has at this moment. He's like, guys, would you just stay awake? My soul is overwhelmed to the point of death. Will you just stay awake and pray with me? Solomon knew the dark moments come. Jesus had a dark moment. And let me be honest, I said that Jesus has always been in community. There was this one instance where he wasn't. And it was the darkest night of his life. And you know why it was dark? Yes, he was paying a crazy high price for my sin and your sin on the cross, but it was the first time ever, and he's never done it since, but it was the first time ever that Jesus was in isolation. Utterly isolated. How do you know, Ben? Well, people who are in isolation, who they've never been separated from an individual before, say things like this: my God, what? Why have you forsaken me? Why have you left me alone? And his disciples all walk away, and he doesn't have community with the Father for the first time ever. And of course, the reason he loses community for the moment is so that we could be reconciled to God forever, but he also wants to reconcile us to each other through Christ. The truest community you could ever have is the community between you and someone else that goes through Christ. What are you going to choose, front end or back end? I know you have a lot of time commitments. I know that you might not be the person who likes to walk into the unknown. I'm not saying those things will be perfectly easy, but I know back end pain will be destructive for your life. You're going to choose before you walk out of here. Front end pain or back end pain? Choose wisely. Pray with me. God, I thank you for the examples you've given us in the scriptures, God, throughout our own lives about the need to be able to thrive in this life. We need to be tied into community. God, it's one of the reasons we started this church. God, I pray for the person in this room who still just isn't sure if it's worth it. Isn't sure if it's worth a couple hours a week. Isn't sure if it's worth the vulnerability. Isn't sure if it's worth whatever. God, show them that part of your plan for their lives involves being in community with each other. Jesus does it. We see it throughout the Old Testament. We see it throughout the New Testament. We see the New Testament in Acts 2, God, that people are so attached to each other. They're meeting frequently. They're giving their stuff to one another. God, in this city, it's not that we need it less, though we have more temptations with work and just pleasure, maybe than other places we could live. God, in a city like this, we need it more. So God, I pray for the person in this room who's just not sure. Jesus, you are our hope, and yet the way that you modeled this thing was to be in community with each other. Pray that we would take your lead and follow on this. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.